For years, the hierarchy in the Leicester workshop was as solid as a roll cage welded by a professional fabricator. Matt Armstrong commanded every space with the confidence of a man who'd salvaged the unsurvivable, who could diagnose a dead engine by listening to it cough. Hannah moved through those same spaces with quiet competence, handing him tools, catching his mistakes before they became catastrophes, the steady presence that balances controlled chaos. But today, something fundamental has shifted. Today, under a silk cover that seems to hold its own weight, sits the proof that the apprentice has become something neither of them fully anticipated, and Matt is only now understanding what he's been building all along. The garage door rises like a curtain, and beneath it lies Hannah's masterpiece. Not a girlfriend's project, not a supportive gesture, a rival empire, constructed methodically in the shadows while Matt chased salvage auctions and documented disasters. This isn't about a new car. It's about the seismic realization that the man who built his brand on teaching others has finally produced a student who surpassed him, not through luck or rebellion, but through careful observation and discipline. The power dynamic that seemed immovable has cracked, and both of them are standing in the rubble of a hierarchy that no longer applies. It began with practical things that no one marked as significant. Hannah held flashlights during brake bleeds, ran errands when gaskets blew, filmed the chaos while Matt documented his own spectacular failures. But while he interpreted her presence as supportive, she was cataloging everything. She watched him force parts that didn't fit, throw money at problems that needed thought, strip bolts through impatience when precision would have solved it faster. While Matt saw an apprentice, Hannah was conducting a masterclass in what not to do. She didn't need to learn from her own failures. She had access to his. Her transition happened almost invisibly. The camera work improved. Then she started appearing on camera herself, offering genuine insights rather than supportive commentary. Her own channel grew, fueled by something the algorithm recognized immediately: authenticity. Where Matt's content thrived on dramatic rebuilds and last-minute resurrections, Hannah's offered something rarer: grounded perspective, patient problem-solving. The kind of methodical approach that didn't make for explosive viral moments, but built a loyal audience that kept returning because they trusted her. 36,000 subscribers became 50,000, then more. These weren't people watching her stand beside Matt. These were people coming specifically for her. The shift accelerated quietly. Comments flooded in asking where Hannah was in videos where she didn't appear. Viewers didn't just accept her presence anymore. They demanded it. The apprentice had developed her own gravitational pull, and Matt was starting to orbit her rather than the other way around. She didn't diminish his brand by stepping forward. She humanized it. She provided a second entry point into their world, a window that felt less like a salvage yard circus and more like a place where actual people built actual things with genuine care. The audience responded not with tolerance, but with hunger for more. The real reckoning came the day Hannah pulled the cover off her own build. Matt was struggling with a flooded supercar engine that refused to turn over, wrestling with problems of his own making. When she fired up a creation, the engine roar that followed wasn't just loud. It was precise. It was a sound of something perfectly engineered, which made it unmistakably different from anything in Matt's recent portfolio. When he turned to look, he found himself staring at a build that was objectively cleaner, better executed, and more professionally assembled than his current project. The welds were flawless. The wiring was organized in a way his own harnesses never managed. Every fitment was exact. For a man who'd built his entire reputation on spectacular failures and miraculous recoveries, this was unfamiliar territory. Matt had never been afraid to be wrong publicly. In fact, his entire brand was constructed on permission. He gave himself to fail gloriously, to document every mistake, and to somehow transform disaster into entertainment. But this was different. This wasn't a failure he could laugh off or spin into content. This was Hannah proving she didn't need his chaos to succeed. She'd learned his lessons without absorbing his flaws. She had taken his knowledge and built something better with it. The workshop soundscape changed almost immediately. Where Matt's voice once dominated everything, there were now two distinct approaches competing for space. Hannah's methodical problem-solving contrasted sharply with his improvisation. When she approached the build, everything was mapped out, When Matt approached one, half the decisions happened in real time. Where Matt would spray paint over rust and move forward, Hannah would strip to bare metal. Where Matt would zip tie a bumper and call it done, Hannah would source the proper fasteners and do it right. The difference was visible in every frame, and the audience didn't miss it. The channel's dynamic transformed overnight. This was no longer simply the Matt Armstrong show with guest appearances from his girlfriend. It had become something more complex and infinitely more interesting. Two approaches to the same passion. Two philosophies competing daily. The tension that developed wasn't bitter or destructive. It was the kind of creative friction that made both of them sharper. When Hannah countered Matt's expensive solutions with clever engineering that cost half as much and worked twice as well, it wasn't an attack. It was partnership in its truest form. When Matt challenged her caution with risk that sometimes paid off spectacularly, it pushed her to be braver. This partnership existed within a business structure most viewers never considered. Behind the automotive drama was a carefully organized enterprise. Hannah was listed as a director in Matt's companies, which meant the narrative of The Apprentice emerging wasn't separate from the business reality. She wasn't just earning respect in the workshop. She was building equity in the empire. The competition people watched wasn't just entertaining. It was an actual business partnership where both parties had skin in the game. Their channel had grown to over 6 million subscribers, a number that reflected not just Matt's success, but the compound effect of having two compelling creators instead of one. The algorithm loved their dynamic because audiences loved it. Viewers would watch Matt attempt something audacious and then wait to see Hannah's measured response. They watch Hannah execute something perfectly and see Matt try to improve on it, usually with entertaining chaos. The engagement metrics showed that when both of them appeared, the video performed better. Their competition wasn't undermining the brand. It was multiplying it. Hannah's independent projects like the Audi RS5 and the Land Rover Defender proved these weren't vanity pieces or content filler. These were legitimate builds that showcased technical capability and problem solving that matched or exceeded Matt's best work. She didn't inherit an audience. She earned one. Her approach was different enough that she attracted viewers who might have found Matt's style overwhelming. Where he was fire, she was precision. Where he made mistakes and recovered, she made few mistakes in the first place. Both approaches had value. The audience had simply discovered that they wanted access to both. Her content philosophy revealed itself in every frame. Nothing was rushed. Everything was considered. She didn't manufacture drama or chase viral moments. She let the work speak. And in an ecosystem oversaturated with manufactured personalities and algorithmic manipulation, that authenticity became her greatest asset. People could sense the difference between content made for engagement and content made for excellence. Hannah's work fell into the latter category, and audiences rewarded it accordingly. The partnership they'd accidentally created transcended typical YouTube dynamics. They weren't just two creators who happened to be in a relationship. They were a complete ecosystem that covered every personality type in the automotive enthusiast community. The head-first risk-takers saw themselves in Matt. The obsessive planners saw themselves in Hannah. Everyone else watched both and learned from both. Matt represented the philosophy that you could attempt anything if you were brave enough to fail. Hannah represented the philosophy that you could accomplish anything if you planned well enough. Beneath the entertainment value was a deeper truth that Matt had to reckon with. Hannah hadn't just become successful. She'd become a check on his impulsiveness. The time she talked him out of terrible financial decisions likely saved the business millions. The time she suggested better approaches probably improved the channel's quality more than any single Matt Armstrong rebuild ever did. He hadn't just created a competitor. He created a partner who made him better simply by being better at certain things than he was. There was vulnerability in acknowledging that reality. Matt had spent years showing audiences that failure was educational, that attempting something beyond your skill level was brave, that the camera should document the journey rather than just the victories. But this was a different kind of failure. This was a mechanical mishap or a business blunder he could laugh away. This was a recognition that he wasn't irreplaceable, that the empire could function without him at its center, that the audience had moved beyond needing him to be the undisputed authority in every conversation. That realization, once it settled in, actually strengthened everything they were building. Forcing Matt to share the stage made the stage bigger for both of them. It pushed him to be better, to clean up his builds, to think smarter about problems rather than just throwing money and labor at them until something worked. It gave audiences something they didn't know they wanted. A genuine partnership where both people were equally capable, equally respected, and equally interesting to watch. The workshop now functioned like a properly balanced system. When Matt's ambition outpaced his planning, Hannah's caution reined him in. When Hannah's perfectionism threatened to slow progress, Matt's confidence pushed her to move forward despite uncertainties. They challenged each other in ways that produced better results than either could achieve alone. The tension was productive rather than destructive. It was creative friction generating heat and light simultaneously. They had transcended the mentor-student dynamic entirely. What emerged was a multimedia production company run by two equals who happened to have started from unequal positions. The power dynamics were now entirely fluid. On some projects, Matt led. On others, Hannah led. Sometimes they competed. Sometimes they collaborated. The audience never knew which approach would emerge, which made every video feel genuinely unpredictable. That unpredictability was currency in content creation. Authenticity mattered more than production value, and their competition was entirely authentic. These weren't manufactured conflicts for engagement. These were two genuinely talented creators with different philosophies trying to prove the superiority of their respective approaches. When Hannah's methodical build ran perfectly on the first attempt, while Matt's ambitious project required troubleshooting, that was a real moment. When Matt pulled off something that Hannah said was impossible, that was a real triumph. The stakes were emotional rather than artificial, and viewers could sense the difference. The Leicester workshop had become something far more significant than a location where cars got restored. It was a masterclass in collaborative excellence. It was a testing ground for competing philosophies. It was a space where both people continued learning from each other despite the hierarchy that had once seemed so fixed. The tools might have belonged to Matt initially, but the knowledge now flowed both directions. That constant exchange between two talented creators with different approaches was what transformed ordinary automotive content into something genuinely compelling and worth returning to repeatedly. The king had reluctantly learned to share his throne, and in doing so, he discovered that the kingdom was actually bigger when ruled by two people instead of one. The apprentice had exceeded her teacher not through rebellion, but through attention, discipline, and the advantage of learning from someone else's mistakes. The student had become the master, and the master had learned that sometimes the greatest success comes from creating something you can't completely control. The student had become the master, and the master had learned that sometimes the greatest success comes from creating something you can't completely control. The workshop now belonged to both of them, and the future had never looked more uncertain or more exciting.